I'd like to read a short webcast statement prior to the meeting starting. This council meeting will be webcast, and I remind all those present that their words and actions will be broadcast to a wider audience, and certain conduct is unacceptable and will not be tolerated. Should any person not wish to be recorded, I advise that they should leave the meeting room prior to any statements being made. Any defamatory statements made are not the position of the council and remain an individual's opinion. Council accepts no responsibility for any defamatory statements, and all liability remains with the person making the remarks. And I would like to acknowledge country. I'd like to acknowledge the Kamilaroi people who are the traditional custodians of this land. I'd also like to pay respect to elders past and present and extend that respect to other Aboriginal people present this evening. And I'd like to invite all present to stand for our meeting prayer. Almighty God, we humbly beseech Thee to vouchsafe Thy blessing upon this council, direct and prosper our deliberations to the advancement of Thy glory and the true welfare of the people of the Regional Council and Australia. Amen. Amen. So, councillors, I'd like to now formally declare the meeting open, and item 1 on the agenda is apologies and leave of absence. We are all in attendance and there are no leave of absence. Councillor Impey, I beg your pardon, is an apology?
Yeah, he's
Yes. Sorry. Councillor Impey, one apology. Could we have a move by Councillor Betts and Councillor Wilson? Thank you. Those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Item 2, community consultation, is that section of the meeting we set aside for members of the community to make representations to the council. We have no registered speakers.
Yes, we do. Mr. McKinnon. Yeah, we haven't got
any. So, Mr. McKinnon. So, if you wish to come forward, please, to make representation on that matter. Thank you.
I have no vested interest in this particular item. It's 8.1, which is the Aquatic Centre. And to me, it's an opportunity to, again, point out things that should be borne in mind while this has an ongoing consideration. In your notes, you'll find that there is actually on page 8 a printout of the TRC's project team. And it's interesting to see that the team is Swimming New South Wales, Water Polo, Aquatic Sports, Allied Health, adjacent stakeholders. Now, nowhere in there is there any representation of the greatest user of that pool, particularly Scully Park, and that is the surrounding community and the disadvantaged community that is nearby. We've just had across the world BLM, or the Black Lives Matter, which is much wider than actually a race issue. It is to do with discontent, it is to do with injustice, it is to do with the growing wealth gap, it is to do with unemployment, and these are the things that are fomented when you continue disadvantage, and there is being continued disadvantage in that area. It creates social restlessness, it creates behaviour that ends up costly to the public, the police and ambulance and everything else. And everybody in this room is complicit in that disadvantage because you all agreed to it. Now, we all know that the entry fees are going to be higher. We all know that the bus fare that goes out there is going to be higher. All of this is going to preclude the greatest user of that pool, the Scully Park, as it is today. Gunnedah had a smart solution of simply a refurb at 12 million. We're talking about 67 million. Now, there's natural blowouts for any big project. Manly, for instance, has gone down the similar line to what's being requested out here, and their blowout was double. Their fares were double afterwards, and the public objected severely. This is probably going to be leased out to a private holder, and that private person will do well to take Manly as an example of what can happen. Now, our summers are getting longer. It's already a month longer. They're getting a lot hotter. Now, that is great grounds for fomenting discontent when you take out a principal recreation area and a cooling recreation area and a socialising recreation area out of a known low socio-economic area. It is something that is clearly, that new pool is clearly, when you look at that project list of who's involved, and it's nothing to do with the common ratepayer, nothing to do with the people of this town. It's to do with an exclusive small swim club group, and I vehemently oppose it.
Thank you, Mr McKinnon. And we have no more members of the public, so councillors, that brings us to item 3 on your agenda, minutes of the previous meeting. Councillor Inglis and Councillor Maxwell, thank you. Any discussion on those minutes? Councillor Inglis?
Mr. Mayor, just a note on the ones for the 9th of June, Councillor Betts is down as the chairperson for tonight's meeting, that's all. So.
Thank you. Any further matters? Councillor Rudder?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just in relation to item, actually, the open part of the meeting of 9th of June. Most meetings recently have been streamed, but that one, due to a technical glitch, has not been streamed or doesn't appear on the council's website at the moment. I don't know whether we should be including it in the minutes to basically say that there is an issue, and that's the reason why it doesn't appear in the public domain.
I'll investigate that.
I didn't even know.
We do have a recording of that. I'll get that investigated and get it put up on the website.
Thank you. Thank you. Any further matters, councillors? If not, I'll put that motion. Those in favour? Those against? The motion is carried. Brings us to item 4, disclosures of interest. Any councillors have any disclosures they wish to register? Councillor Rudder?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 11.1, which becomes 12.1, the Northern Inland Centre Sporting Excellence. Inland Centre, yeah. Stage 2. I'm a member of the board of Tamworth Hockey Association, and I'd like to declare a less than significant non-pecuniary interest in that matter, and I'll remain in the chamber and participate in the discussion.
Thank you. If we have no further disclosures, councillors, we'll move through item 5. There is no mayoral minute, and item 6, there's no notice of motion. That brings us to item 7.1. Move Councillor Wilson and Councillor Betts. Thank you. Councillor Wilson, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Yes, I will, Mr. Mayor. Just one part of it, as the City Centre Working Group had a discussion on Fitzroy Street, and yesterday I happened to be in town when the new ribbon seat was being installed. And it is quirky and it's a lot of fun, and it absolutely attracted a lot of interest and smiles from everybody. People were taking photos before it even been installed. I have pertinent photos for you, Mr. DM. And the interesting thing is it's been very strategically located so that we'll have hashtag Tamworth New South Wales. So you get the seat, whoever happens to be on it, and however many, with our post office behind it. And it really creates a great image. And so it's starting to enliven that little bit of our important space. So thank you.
Thank you. Any councillors wish to speak against the motion? Any councillors wish to make comment? Councillor Betts?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I participated in that City Centre Working Group, and it was conducted by Blue Jeans remotely, and it was noted by a number of all the participants how efficient it was that they get either do the conference from their office or their home, and it made it a lot more efficient, and they would like to see that continue so that they can participate at that sort of more regular basis.
Thank you, Councillor Betts. The brave new world. Any further comments, councillors? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The motion is carried. Item 8.1. Move Councillor Betts. Second, Councillor Inglis. Thank you. Councillor Betts, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. we really haven't got any option at this stage to go with the recommendation, but I do see that, yeah, it's a vital part of our strategic plan, and the COVID-19 crisis has actually put a bit of a damper on it. But I think it's a project that needs to go ahead and continue down that path, but I know it's got to wait 4 months.
Thank you. Any councillors wish to speak against the motion? Any councillors wish to make comment? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Those against? The motion is carried. Item 8.2. Move Councillor Inglis and seconded Councillor Wilson. Thank you. Councillor Inglis, do you wish to speak to your motion?
No, thanks, Mr Mayor.
Any councillors wish to speak against the motion? Any councillors wish to make comment? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The motion is carried. Item 8.3. Move Councillor Webb. Seconded Councillor Maxwell. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Webb. Are there any councillors wish to speak against the motion? Any councillors wish to make comment? Thanks, Councillor Rodda.
Just, thank you, Mr Mayor. Just in relation to dot point 4, we did meet with some of the representatives. Myself and Councillor Maxwell met with some of the representatives, including staff, at that site a few days ago, and it will be a great initiative for the people that ride up that road. In fact, while I was just a little bit late, but while they were waiting there, 3 bicycle riders rode up there and you know, I guess demonstrated in that very short period of time, between about 4 o'clock to 4:30, you know, that it was a reasonably popular cycle route, and I'm sure that this proposal will enhance the safety of those that, you know, wish to obviously use the bike track on the other side. So, you know, the stakeholders of that organisation and Tan Bug, they're very happy with the outcome there.
Thank you. Any further comment, councillors? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The motion is carried. Item 8.4. Move Councillor Wilson and Councillor Webb. Thank you. Councillor Wilson, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Yes, I will, Mr Mayor. Just to say it's an excellent report. It's really well constructed and clear. I know it indicates we have had a lot of rain, but it certainly hasn't been in the catchment. And the rain's boosted growth, and it's boosted crops, and it's boosted morale, but it hasn't boosted our catchment. But I always think it's worth noting that the situation we find ourselves in is in many ways due to the management of the water storage, and we need to be mindful of that, but nevertheless, I think everything that we're doing now is pertinent.
Thank you. Any councillors wish to speak against the motion? Any councillors wish to make comment? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The motion is carried. Item 8.5. Councillor Betts and Councillor Tickle, thank you. Councillor Betts, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Yeah, just briefly, Mr Mayor, actually there needs to be some commendation to go to the staff and the working group that's the task force that's been looking at these issues, because there's been a lot of work and there's going to have to be some hard decisions made. But I think it goes back to what Councillor Wilson said when she was speaking to the last motion. I think we really need to work on the water sharing plan, because I think that is going to be one of the keys to maintaining the longevity of the secure water supply.
Thank you. Any councillors wish to speak against the motion? Any councillors wish to make comment? Councillor Wilson.
Mr Mayor, can I just say once again, this is an excellent report. It's comprehensive and it's clear and it's accountable. And anything like this promotes a strong feeling that state management of water and the water sharing plan has significantly exacerbated the situation we're in. I just found, I think two things. Smart that come up in this report. Smart meters are almost non-negotiable. I think they're important for it to happen down the track, but I think now is a jolly good time to put them in. And another point of interest, I found that the Keeper pipeline, which we've probably talked about for 6 years now, is actually closer than a pipeline from Split Rock, which really surprised me. But we hope we won't be looking at strategic and critical changes, but nevertheless, we've got some good options here. Expensive, but good.
Thank you. Any councillors wish to speak against the motion?
Against.
Against?
Done that.
Any councillors wish to make comment? Councillor Inglis?
Oh, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, look, it's a very comprehensive report and looks at virtually all manner of options, and it's hard to think of any that haven't been covered. So, and that was the purpose of the report, and the authors and the staff have done a great job in that regard. But the options are expensive, extremely expensive. I couldn't get over the annual operating costs for the truck-based karting. It's only 15 million. It's incredible, isn't it? But Mr. Mayor, the fact that the options at the end of the day, and we all hope that we won't have to exercise any of them, clearly the most important ones are very expensive, to the point where this council simply does not have the funds to do. So it would seem to me that we just need to add something to that recommendation to just get the discussion going from tomorrow. And that is, who's going to pay for it? And the amendment that if the mover and seconder was happy, if not, I'm happy to move an amendment. And I'd like to add the words, Mr. Mayor, and happy to seek your view as well. And further, that the New South Wales Premier, so the recommendation as is, and further, that the New South Wales Premier be requested to critically review the report, the TEWSP, and advise Council as a matter of urgency on the New South Wales Government's preferred option and funding strategies.
So, Councillor Betts and Councillor Tickle, are you happy with that? Councillor Betts, happy? Are you okay with that as an amendment, Councillor Tickle? Yes, thank you. So that is included in our motion.
Yeah, so basically, Mr. Mayor, it's fairly obvious what it's doing. I think it is important. My guess is it may have got referred off straight away to water, but I do believe this needs to go to the Premier, particularly in light of recent events and the management issues with Chaffey and all the rest of it. But it is a discussion that needs to be had now, because as the report makes clear, that if one of the big ticket options is going to be the preferred option, there's at least a 12-month to a year-and-a-half time frame. So we can't be having the bloody argument and debates at that critical time about who's going to pay for it, because it's fairly obvious who will need to. That needs to be done in a proper way. And of course, governments need to budget, state governments need to budget just like we budget. So it seems an important thing that we have to do, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councillor Webb?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, it is a good report, and I support everything that Councillor Inglis just said. But I think there's a couple of things that, whilst our people are doing a wonderful job putting together plans and working with other agencies to try and get the best outcomes that we can possibly get, we aren't really getting the best outcomes we can possibly get, because there are some really some strategic things that we need to do. One is, and it's not up to council so much to do this, but it's up to the state government, and that is we need to maintain as much inflow that goes into that Chaffey Dam and grows the percentage in Chaffey Dam as best we can. And there's some ways of doing that. And it seems that people aren't in a position or don't want to help us do that. Firstly, the environmental flows, we've seemed to have reached an outcome there which will assist us. That's a good thing. I thank those that have caused that to happen. Secondly we've got some well fields on Scotts Road that we're using, and we reached our allocation, and much correspondence between this council and the state government authorities to try and allow us to use what water was going past the city, to supply water to the city without drawing from the dam, and would have kept water in the dam and would have allowed the dam potentially to grow if we did get some rain, the capacity that is. There seems to be no real consideration for supporting that strategy of maintaining that water in the dam. And I think that's a failure. Now, we have written to the Premier, and we agreed to do that at the last meeting, but we're still sitting here. There's water flowing down the river. We could, with the permission of the state government, be pumping enough or a fair amount of our water for this city's uses out of those wells and leaving as much water as we possibly can in our main storage, Chaffey Dam, to see us through the spring and summer months if it doesn't rain significantly between now and then. We all live in there is a bit of a false sense of security because it has been raining and our lawns are wet, and the rain tanks that people do have are mostly full. So there is that little bit of false sense of security. But come spring and summer, if the capacity in that dam doesn't grow significantly, then we're going to really feel the pinch. And we'll feel the pinch when the residents of this city go to the next level, and that'll be 100 litres per person per day. We could extend the time of us getting to that by a long way if they would let us use those well fields. We could extend that time by a long way if they'd let us do a few other things to help us maintain whatever water's flowing into that Chaffey Dam to stay there. But there just doesn't seem to be an appetite for it. And I think that's very disappointing, and I think the people of this city should be made aware of the work that we're doing to try and maintain the dam's capacity at the highest level possible, but we don't seem to be getting any help. And I think that's a terrible travesty of justice. I think that's very much a shame. I agree with Councillor Betts when he talked about the water sharing plan. The water sharing plan is not helping us at all. The water sharing plan will be reviewed and will be changed. But really, in many terms, the water sharing plan probably should have been suspended some time ago to allow us to maintain what water we can in that dam. So there's a lot of work being done, and I congratulate the Director and his staff for the report and what they're doing, but we just don't seem to be getting any help from further afield.
Thank you. Councillor Rudder.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I applaud the amendment to the recommendation. It does go some way to assuage my concerns about some of the other options. I'm personally not confident that Dungowan Dam, even when constructed, will deliver the water security that we need, and so therefore I think we need to be looking at many other alternatives into the future. I think in the short term, a pipeline option from one of those other storages, possibly Copetoun Split Rock or Keep It would be a good option to get us through, at least to have that an alternative. I was concerned, I agree that it's a very comprehensive report, and I was concerned about some of those actions, like Action 17, consider shutting down non-essential businesses. Now, in a community that's already been ravaged by drought and then corona, and even some of our communities to a lesser degree fire, that would be the last thing we want to do to any of our businesses, and that's I guess the impetus behind having that discussion with the leader of the state of New South Wales to try and get some, I guess, convey some understanding to her and in her that we are in a pretty invidious position here. I did note that Chaffey's increased by 0.3% this week, and hopefully now the surrounding catchment has started to really absorb as much water as it can, and we'll see some more flows into there if we get some decent rains. Another obviously concern was Action 18. If supplies become critical, commence carting up to 2 megalitres per day. That's not going to even cut it, is it really? And as Councillor Inglis mentioned, the expense, the sheer expense of that, and we as a council could not bear the cost, and just certainly couldn't impose that cost on our ratepayers either. So and I do agree. There's a number of different legislative tools that probably haven't dealt us the best cards over the last few years, including that one that allows inter valley trades of water between, say, the Peel and the Nemoy. That hasn't been helpful to us, and I sort of wonder whether that's part of the problem in relation to the water sharing plan. Then there's the Water Management Amendment Act, which wasn't a fantastic tool either, that actually took water from communities because they thought it was going to rain. They didn't think we were going to fall into one of the worst droughts in living memory, and that's a real problem to this community and many other rural communities. So very supportive of this, and it's sad that we have to bear the brunt of the bad news to our ratepayers, and that's why I think it's important that we convey these and have these discussions with the state government to basically say, you put us in this mess and you can get us out of it.
Thank you. Any further comments, councillors? Councillor Tickle?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I agree with what's been said tonight, in that the staff have done an exceptional job with this and the working group. We seem to continually have to be mitigating other people's problems. Councillor Webb rightly pointed out that the water has been mismanaged, and as we stand here, is still mismanaged. We've got flows going down the hill. Why does this happen? No one can seem to answer, but yet the authorities don't want to listen to the people. They don't want to listen to our highly qualified and practical and sensible staff who also attend these meetings. We're told what to do. Over the last few years, we've seen exceptional amounts of water just flowing down the river, all because the bureaucrats and unfortunately our government ministers think it's going to rain. And of course now the inevitable has happened. We've been put in this terrible situation, and it is important for us to have a plan, but it's also important that people don't panic, particularly businesses thinking they have to shut down. Hopefully it will rain, and people are very responsible in this community with their use of water, and by community I mean residential and the wider community. They're all playing their part, and I think as a council we need to continue to raise awareness and educate the community further. And the plan is necessary to have, and let's hope that we don't get to some of the drastic stages that are listed in there. But in saying this about the government, as recently as their so-called consultation, they're not even considering the drought we're in planning for the next 10 and 20 years. So it's an uphill battle all the time, because our elected parliaments, our government bodies, state and federal, in this case it's mostly state, are not doing what they were elected to do. How can you let communities run out of water? Why don't politicians declare their interest with water? Why is it? Why don't they say who owns what licences? It's a dire situation right throughout the state. And unfortunately, it's the residents and the business community that continually got to try to work around these problems, and it's getting serious, and it should never have got to that. And so again, I commend the staff and thank them for having to continually work around to these problems and come up with such an excellent plan using their professional expertise and practicality.
Thank you. Any final discussions, councillors? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Those against? The motion is carried. And councillors, the next item, item 8.6, the late item relating to Regional Household Chemical Collection Program funding deed. Councillor Inglis moving and Councillor Otto seconding. Thank you. Councillor Inglis, do you wish to speak to the motion?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Any councillors wish to speak against the motion? Any councillors wish to make comment? Councillor Wilson?
Just a question, Mr Mayor. Does that mean that council like Gundarra or Walker gets the same allocation as us, as a city the size of Tamworth?
Yes.
Profit-making ventures or something?
Any further comments, councillors? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Those against? The motion is carried. Item 9.1.
Move it.
Move Councillor Webb, thank you. Seconded Councillor Wilson, thanks. Discussion, or Councillor Webb, do you wish to speak to your motion? Any councillors wish to speak against? Councillor Inglis?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I am going to speak against it and I'm going to propose an amendment. But firstly, here we go through the annual charade of having to, decide our own remuneration. It's a disgraceful system. Federal and state politicians don't have to do it, so I'm not sure why local government elected members have to. The system should be that there shouldn't be a range, that there should be an amount, and then that's what it is. Notwithstanding, as a matter of philosophy and principle, Mr Mayor, I actually favour the increase because I've argued it for years that if we want to get as many people as possible to stick their hands up and have a crack at local government representation, there needs to be a reasonable remuneration to offset the costs of that, particularly for younger people, people with a mortgage and all these sorts of things. So the greater the amount there, I do believe it will have an impact. I see we've gone into, well, as we know, the actual fees for everybody is a zero increase, and I guess that's in keeping. I assume the tribunal was acting under instruction there, because it's similar to the zero increase for state bureaucrats. But this year, of all years, we've finally been categorised into a category that is actually befitting of this council. So of all times, Mr General Manager, for that to happen, it has to happen while we've got COVID-19. But the actual, there is an excellent match of the physical and demographic features, and when you read it, you go, yep, that's the one we should be in. So, but that's basically the reason why the increase is there, Mr Mayor. And it is a 19% increase, and my good conscience just can't allow me to think that that's just right for this year. I do agree with it in principle, but it just couldn't happen at a worse time. We're leaving our rate increase at 2.6 for the community. We're not lessening that. Well, that's the way it looks like it's going to go. So therefore, Mr Mayor, in good conscience, so the amendment, if I can get a seconder, is basically that for 2021, it stay the same as it currently is, and that from 1 July next year, it go to the full maximum for the category. There's an election not long after that, so that sets it up well, in my view, for people, new people who, may be thinking of standing for public office. So if I can get a seconder for that.
Mr Mayor, I'd move it second as a mover. I'm happy to accept that amendment.
Thank you. And the
So it's just an addition to the motion.
seconder was Councillor.
Or can we do that because it does oppose what I was...
No, I don't.
No, we can't actually. Councillor Betts is prepared to second, so we now do have an amendment, councillors. So, Councillor Inglis, do you wish to?
Just to make sure the wording, all I'm trying to say, Mr Mayor, is that the fee that we receive now stays the same for the next financial year, so there's no increase. Same fee, and the best way to say that is that the 1920 fee will be the same as the 1920 fee, and from the 1st of July 2021, it's going quick, isn't it? Be the effective rate as per the remuneration tribunals.
The maximum.
The max.
Maximum.
Well, this council's always done that as long as, yeah, and that's proper. So that's my amendment, Mr Mayor.
And seconded by councillor Betts.
Yep.
Councillor Inglis, could I put a question, possibly either to yourself or the General Manager? The increase for next year will be decreed by the regulatory body. So if that increase was at a standard level of around 2.5%, 3%, would that not be that increase would apply to the current fee? I'm not sure that we have the authority to decide what next year's fee might be. I think that will be done by...
No, what I'm proposing, Mr Mayor, is simply that the fee from 1st of July next year be the fee as determined by the Remuneration Tribunal for regional centres, which is the new category that we're in.
Yeah. I understand what the Mayor's saying, Councillor Inglis, and that is that Council will in June next year adopt the new determination anyway for the following year. So if we maintain the fee from 1920 for the current or for the coming financial year, that's probably all the recommendation needs to say, knowing that Council will redetermine the fees in June next year for the subsequent year.
You are absolutely right. I was just making a point about how I felt about the future.
Okay, so we've got a mover and a seconder. Any councillors wish to speak against the motion? Councillor Wilson?
Mr Mayor, this is actually the first time where I feel our council has been appropriately located in the hierarchy, I suppose, of councils, metropolitan, regional and rural. And what a council of Tamworth's ilk or Wagga's ilk does compared to what a metropolitan council does is almost non-comparable in the sense that we manage water systems, which of course is a huge amount of trouble. We manage it currently because metropolitan councils don't have to worry about where the water comes. That comes from a bigger area, that comes from a bigger body. We manage airports, we manage land, we manage major infrastructure, and it's non-comparable. And I thought at last regional councils, and particularly of our size, are being recognised for where they sit and for what they do. And I think it's quite appropriate that this change happened. And when I actually analysed it down, the difference amounts to probably the money we get for collecting 3 shopping trolleys off the street a week. So the increase that he would receive, according to the proposal, which is what we normally accept, would be equivalent to about 3 shopping trolleys each off the street, and the fee we get from the shopping centre for us retrieving them. So I actually, and I am thinking about the future. It is a huge commitment, and there needs to be an appropriate response. So I understand the time, but I actually think we've come from a long way back, and at last the state has acknowledged where councils like Tamworth sit, and I think this is one way of it being acknowledged. So I know it is awkward times, and I know it looks like being inappropriate. But the way I'm seeing it is that at last, this council and future councils of our ilk will be recognised for where they sit and for what they're being responsible for. So I know I must admit that the amendment doesn't sit easy with me. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Mr Mayor, can I just be clear that Councillor Wilson, so you're not accepting the amendment that Councillor Webb indicated he would as the seconder of the original motion? You want the original motion?
Yes, I'm correct.
No, I couldn't accept it because
That was
Councillor
contrary.
Betts,
Yeah,
Councillor Betts
Councillor
seconds
Betts.
my amendment.
Yes. So we have a legitimate amendment. Any councillors wish to speak against the motion?
against the amendment.
Against the amendment, I'm sorry.
Mr Chairman, I think at long last, and I agree with Councillor Wilson, at long last, I think the councillors have been recognised for the amount of time that they've put in, and compared to other states, we're just so far behind now. And I know there's never a good time. It's like putting up rates, there's never a good time, but I certainly am against the amendment.
Thank you. And councillors, I would also like to speak against the amendment. I think, you know, if we look at where this whole debate started, was probably around 2004 when our Tamworth Regional Council footprint was represented by 5 mayors and probably in excess of 50 councillors. You know, that workload was shared right across. That certainly has changed. We've got new things like joint organisations that require a lot of extra work, and you know, I think if we're ever going to be attracting new entrants to the industry, I think that there is, as Councillor Maxwell suggested, there is no time for a good time, and I wouldn't be supporting the amendment. Any other councillors wish to speak against?
Yeah, Mr Mayor, I've listened to all of the debate on it, but I had the position when I first read the report that we've been fighting for many, many years to be recognised as a council that we are recognised as now. And the remuneration, as it's been up until now, has been somewhat insignificant for the work that's required. If we step into Queensland, for example, and we look at councils similar to our own, and I'll talk about councils like Bundaberg, Rockhampton, those councillors do very similar work and are expected to do pretty much the same amount of work as we are. Now, in that state, those councillors are given a remuneration of about 100k a year, or somewhere between 90 and 110, depending on what council that you might be in. The mayors in those cases obviously receive a lot more than that for the work that they have to do. But they actually don't have to do any more work than us as councillors or our mayor as the mayor. So in those councils, those mayoral remunerations would probably be in the vicinity, not probably, I know they're in the vicinity of 240 to 250,000. So there's a hell of an inequity there. And that's been recognised for a long time. And we've fought, along with all of the other local government bodies in New South Wales, to at least see some recognition for the amount of work that needs to be done. The next point is that, and I talk about that, I think Councillor Wilson talked about it, Councillor English talked about it in his, when he was supporting his amendment, and that is that we're going to need to attract some good people to the new council at the next election. Now, there are many people out there that will consider taking on the job if they can offset some of their costs for being a councillor in a council of this size with the remuneration that they might receive from the council. Many of those people would be very good councillors and most likely make great representatives of the community and of the region. If they see that it's going to cost them money, as it has cost a lot of us over the years, they would probably be less likely to put their hand up. And I think that we need to probably look at this in a way and say, look, looking into the future, that's something that we really seriously need to think about. We need to make sure that we're leaving an organisation in a position where they will attract good, suitable, stable people to run for office in this local government area. Of course, as previously said, this is probably one of the worst times that this could have come before us. We've been fighting for years and years and years to try and get to this position, or somewhere near this position. In fact, we've been fighting for more than this, but we've been given this opportunity to put our hand up and perhaps receive this amount of remuneration. So in supporting the recommendation that I spoke to initially, there is always the opportunity for each of us as individuals to, if given an amount of money as a stipend, I'll call it a stipend, is to work as a councillor, and you feel as a councillor that perhaps that some of that money could be better spent in the community, there is always that opportunity for you, and it's there in black and white, for you to take whatever money that you feel out of the increase you've got, or out of any part of that stipend that you're already receiving, and you can donate that back to the community through some council organised, activities. So it could be money going back into the community for some things that are going to provide better services for members of our community in terms of community services. So whilst we say we should hold off because it is a very bad time, yes, it is a very bad time, but we still have that opportunity to take this on board for what I do believe the councillors in this council are entitled to and actually work for and deserve. And as bad a time as it is, if we're feeling as individuals, as I probably do, that this is a bad time, we can still donate that money back into the system to provide the community with that money that we've taken on board, but we're giving back.
Thank you. Councillors, I do seek your forgiveness. I have made a minor blunder with our meeting procedure, and I have not taken alternative for or against arguments. I now give the opportunity for two councillors to speak. For Councillor Betts.
Yes, thanks, Mr Mayor. While I agree with 99% of the original motion, for all the reasons, I won't go over any of it because I totally agree with what the councillors have said, but it's just simply not the right time. I know we need to head down that path, but in this COVID-19 crisis that we're, as a council, suffering, and the state, nation and the globe suffering, it's just not the right time, so I'll be
Thank you. And Councillor Rodder.
So I'm speaking in favour of the amendment, Mr Mayor, just to be clear. But I'll just quickly explain the reasons why. Just prior to becoming a councillor, I used to fill shelves at Coles, and when I thought I'd like to do a role that allowed me to speak to people because I like talking to people, and also obviously making the lives of people a bit better. And so when I thought of the becoming a councillor, obviously try and enhance our communities. It didn't really necessarily worry me how much that was. I was, I guess, pleasantly surprised that it was as generous as it was. That enabled me not to have a third job, and it still does. And I think that I think many people in the community appreciate that the role of a councillor is a part-time role. And the remuneration that they get is, I guess, a little bit of a compensation for the time taken to do that job. In stark contrast, I can see the inequity of the system in relation to your role, because I know that you give, I don't know how many hours a week you work, but I know it's more than 40. It's probably more than 50 and 60, probably 70. I'm not sure, but I think that if we could pull this motion apart and perhaps, I guess, reward your position with the increase, I think it would go some way to remunerate that position for the large amount of time that you've dedicated to it over the number of years that I've been a councillor. But I agree with Councillor Inglis in relation to his amendment, because it certainly is not the right time. We have many people in our community that either have lost their job, they've reduced hours, and simply are not enjoying anything that might remotely look like a pay increase, and therefore I cannot support it at this time because of that reason. And I think that the alternative is good, but as I said, I would be happy for an amendment to the amendment to basically increase the position of mayor, because, you know, if it's compared to, and I've got a friend who's a councillor in Queensland, we are so far behind the 8 ball. They've got virtually full-time remuneration plus many other benefits for not doing full-time positions, and I think it's unfair and certainly in stark contrast to the way we're treated here.
Thank you. Any further discussion, councillors? If not, I'll put the amendment. Those in favour of the amendment? Those against the amendment? The amendment fails, and I've now opened the motion for debate. Any councillors wish to speak for the motion? Councillor Wilson.
Mr Mayor, we're reverting to the original recommendation. I'd just like to say councillors in this region are the second largest, outside the state government, they're the largest road authority in the state. They manage 1 city, 4 towns, 17 villages, manage airports, water catchments, and are accountable for a huge city, regional city. And I know it's not a good time, but it's been a long time to happen, and I think it would be embarrassing if Tamworth councillors were treated differently to councillors in Wagga and in Dubbo and in Port Macquarie. I think there's a gross inequity there that needs to be rectified, and that comes with the responsibility.
Thank you. Any councillors wish to speak against the motion? Councillor Rodda.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I speak against it purely because, you know, we're not Port Macquarie or Orange, we're Tamworth, and I'd like to think that we're in touch with the views and the thoughts and the sentiments and the concerns of our ratepayers, and that's why I can't support it. They're doing it tough for a range of reasons, including Corona, the drought, and in other areas, the fires, and the economy, I guess, and I simply cannot support it because I just think we need to have some solidarity with them and understand that they're suffering, and we should acknowledge that by opposing this motion.
Thank you. Any councillors wish to speak for the motion? Any further comments? Councillor Inglis.
Mr Mayor, just to reiterate that in principle, I think it is a good thing for local government and the 23 other councils that have received the new regional centre, but for all the reasons that the people who voted for the amendment, I won't reiterate them, but now's not the time. But I just thought, for the record, Mr Mayor, as you know, I diarise all my time that I spend on local government activities, and if this gets up tonight, my hourly rate will go up by $3 an hour.
Thank you. Any further comments, councillors? Councillor Webb.
Just a comment, Mr Mayor. I guess in the community there will be a lot of people out there will say that we shouldn't be taking on this extra increase, which has been recommended by an external body, a completely independent body. It's been recommended not by this council but by an independent body. So I'd just like to make that point. And I think the reason that I'm actually supporting it tonight is I think we need to look to the future, as I said earlier, and we need to look to future councils. So we need to be able to place this council up at the level where it can attract those people with a reasonable remuneration that will allow them to give the time to the organisation that they have to and take their time away from their business or their family that they will need to do. And I think that could help encourage some better quality candidates at the next election. So I think it's not for me that I'm talking about the increase and supporting it. It's for the future councils and for the future candidates and prospective civic leaders.
Thank you. Any further comments, councillors? If not, I'd like to put the motion. Those in favour? Those against? Motion's carried. That brings us to item 9.2, Moved Councillor Inglis, thank you. And seconded Councillor Maxwell, thanks. Councillor Inglis, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Only, Mr Mayor, just one comment. I noticed in the report it references that we'll get a report at some point in the future about the deferral of the water and sewer headwork charges being on a permanent basis. I will be one councillor at least that'll be very hard to convince about the good governance in that, and in particular the thing that we need to be absolutely very careful about as that report is written and when we get it, and that is that we collect those headworks for a reason, and that money actually gets spent on things for a reason. So we need to make sure that there's always money in that restricted asset to do the works that are necessary, because that's got a lot to do with being shovel ready for developments and all kinds of things. So it's one of them things that can sound like a good idea, but you really need to examine the implications of not having that cash flow available.
Mr Mayor, can I make a comment on that?
Yes.
Mr Mayor, Councillor Inglis, I would just like to make a comment on that. The interpretation of that is probably a bit ambiguous, and that is that we're not saying that we defer them permanently. What we're saying is the current system of not requiring them to be paid until a block is sold from a developer would be maintained. So in other words, we would continue the deferral that you don't have to pay the headworks charges up front when you create the subdivision, so the developer doesn't wear that as a holding cost of the land until such time as it is actually sold. But you would still have to pay the headworks charges once the block is either sold or developed. So we're certainly not saying we're waiving the fees. What we're saying is we would defer the payment of them until such time as the blocks were actually sold. So we would still get the same revenue, we would just get it at a later date so that development is encouraged by not having that as a major cost up front when they do a subdivision.
Any councillors wish to speak against the motion? Any councillors wish to make comment? Councillor Wilson.
Mr Mayor, point 3, I'd actually like to see that deferred until the 1st of September for the reasons that there's school holidays coming up, and it's just like almost like a small gift to shoppers in Tamworth. It encourages the use of the CBD, and with the support of my fellow colleagues, I'd like to propose an amendment in that item 3 that approve the reintroduction of the CBD parking fees from the 1st of September.
Do we have a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Rodda, thank you. Okay, well, Councillor Wilson, do you now wish to speak to your amendment?
No, I really have.
Thank you. Any councillors wish to speak against the amendment? Any councillors wish to make comment? Councillor Tickle.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. By deferring the reintroduction of the fees, it will give businesses a chance to recover and encourage visitors and our locals to use the CBD and support retail, cafes, restaurants and professional services. For the first time since we've introduced parking in White Street some years ago, on the southern side of White Street, I've actually seen it full. So isn't that encouraging? People do actually use that area, and if it's free, as they always did in the past. And I've always been a strong believer, and do the maths, if we abolish the parking fees permanently on the southern side of White Street, the actual income we receive from that would not offset a new parking lot that we're always talking about. $17,000 to build one parking space. It would take a long, long time to recover that sort of money in White Street. So it's been very encouraging to see on a daily basis that the southern side of White Street is actually being used right up as far as the service station. But I certainly support the delay reintroducing any parking fees until the 1st of September.
Thank you. Any further comments, councillors? Councillor Rudder?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I certainly support that. I've spoken to a number of businesses that feel that they're only just getting started again, and that minor concession would certainly help them out. Hopefully, get them going well just prior to the Christmas period. But certainly in relation to Headworks, I'm more than supportive of that deferral period. There's a number of councils that don't charge those upfront Headworks charges, and I'd like to think that when we're going into or getting out of the coronavirus period, that will be an attractive local government area to invest in, because we don't have those charges imposed at the start. They're there at the end for when the purchaser is keen to put up their hand and buy the property. So I'm sure that would certainly help that and stimulate that interest in developers and builders to invest in Tamworth and surrounds.
Thank you. Any further comments, Councillor Webb?
Just a short one, Mr Mayor, and that is, it's a good package as it's following on and we're transitioning into the future. I do support what Councillor Wilson said in terms of parking. I think this will be a long transition for every community, not only in New South Wales but across the nation. A long transition away from out of this COVID experience and the impact that's had on the nation and its finances, and in particular small business and their finances. So I think we've got to be very careful and very mindful. We continue to do what we can to support all those around us and do whatever we can to keep them operating as best they can. And as Councillor Rodder said, we need to make sure that we're seen as a region for people to come and invest in, because we will look after them as best we can.
Thank you. Any final comments, councillors?
Sorry, Mr Mayor, just a question. I was the seconder, I believe, to the amendment.
Yes, thank you. So, councillors, Councillor Tickle.
Oh, sorry, no, I've already spoken, I'll sort of speak to the amendment there, but I just want clarification on takeaway food, clarification that the extra seating on the footpath or seating on the footpath will still be allowed to spread in front of the business next door.
Through you, Mr Mayor, Councillor Tickle, nobody took up that option. Nobody, so while it was available, we didn't have a single business applied for the additional space, so we're essentially just removing something that hasn't been utilised.
And councillors, I'd just like to put one question to the General Manager. What the revenue involved in that further 3 months of no parking?
So based on my sort of round calculations, if 89,000 is a quarter, then it's about 59,000, something like that.
Okay. So, no final comments, councillors. I'd now like to put the amendment. Those in favour? Those against? Who against? The amendment is carried. And now becomes the motion. I'd now like to put the motion. Those in favour? Right. Those against? The motion is carried. That brings us to 9.3, councillors. Move Councillor Inglis, and secondly, Councillor Maxwell, thank you. Councillor Inglis, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Just a few words, Mr Mayor. As you know, we go through a process before we get to tonight with workshops and drafts and all the rest of it. Mr Mayor, I would ask that, and I might ask the Director to comment. I was just curious why we didn't include the added, you'll remember the added paragraph we put in when we adopted the draft. That was that in recognition of, COVID-19 environment, that our forecasted financial results are expected to be subject to material variances. One could even be a little bit more direct in those words, because I'll guarantee they will be materially different to what we're proposing. In particular, as we even say in our documents, that it's been predicated on a business as usual, and we know that's not the case, so I think it's important from a disclosure perspective that we include. So might just ask the director, was it an intentional omission or just?
No, through you, Mr Mayor, no, it was simply an oversight. So the words that we used in the draft that went on exhibition was that council, in recognition of its disclosure and accountability obligations, notes that due to the extreme economic volatility and ongoing fiscal uncertainty in the COVID-19 impacted environment, council's forecasted financial results are expected to be subject to material variances. So we would propose to add that into there as well.
You
And we will
think that's a wise course?
I do. There's no doubt that we're obviously seeing a relaxation in restrictions, which is a very good thing, but there is also, we're seeing in other states spikes that we don't know what the impacts of those will be yet. So that is absolutely the right thing to add in, given this uncertainty.
So with
Councillor
councillors
Maxwell.
indulgent,
Thank you.
just include that. Mr Mayor, just on the budget itself, as you know, in the early days, I suggested we should be looking at not rate capping at a decreased amount, but I have come to the view that whilst it would have been nice to just do a reduction in that rate cap, zero would have been nice for everybody with the current times and what have you, but I've come to the opinion that I think the 2.6 can be justified, in particular because we need to ensure that as part of the recovery from COVID, and no one quite knows when we'll get to the recovery time, but we as a council need to make sure that we've got the economic capacity to do our best endeavours to stimulate the local economy, and we're doing that with some of our COVID measures, and they're costing money, of course, because our goal has to be to do whatever we can do as a council anyway to ensure that there are initiatives there to create employment, maintain employment, and have a sense of stability in the economy. So that's what swung me around on not arguing for a reduced amount on the rates. Mr Mayor, my other comment would be in our 4-year delivery program on page 28. There's a list of planned expenditure, and as we know, we've taken a real whack out at the airport, and that's clearly going to be there for at least another year. Mr Mayor, you'll be well aware of the 10 million and the 3 million that we're trying to get thing. With the 3 million component, and as I say on page 28, it lists all the things it would go to, and it's basically refurbishment of the facility. And right now in COVID, particularly with the previous training space, we have a perfect opportunity to get in and do some major. So I would really encourage the staff to be banging the drum on that from a COVID-19 economic stimulus perspective, because the majority of that money will go to local contractors, because we know the heating system's buggered, the air conditioning system needs, it's great stuff from a stimulus perspective in relation to COVID money. So I really think we should bang the drum on that 3 mil component. I know the 10's got other requirements and parameters, and we'll get to that, but I think that's really something, because now's just a perfect time to do that. And I'm sure the local contractors will be very pleased with that. And you can make a very solid argument on that. So that's it for me, Mr Mayor. I've had all my discussions on the early thing. And I see the budget now reflects the March quarterly budget review, which is good, but it's essentially a no changes budget from the draft.
Thank you. Any councillors wish to speak against the motion? Any councillors wish to make comment? Councillor Rudder.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. More question than comment. Just on page 66 of the next year's, there was reference to P4101 intermodal facility in Tamworth, which showed capital income of 19,728,612 and capital expenses of 21,977,612. I was just wondering, why is there more expenses than income?
That's council's contribution to those works.
Oh, that's right.
So the council pays, usually on average, around about a 10% contribution towards those particular works for us to secure the funding. So it's not fully funded by government. We typically pay about 10% of the cost.
Yes, just on page 260, there was references to Taminda Ring Road, in brackets Jury Street Extension, which was classified under P4101 intermodal facility. Is that, because that's a fair way, Jury Street's a fair way from the intermodal, was that not classified right, or was that?
I'd have to take it on notice, Councillor, and have a look and give you some detail about that one. I'm not 100% sure. But it will have a very good explanation. I've got our finance people up the back, and I'm sure they've got a very good explanation.
It was all part of the growing local economies funding.
Yeah, there's two components. So we got it in two lots of money. So there was one big amount, which was the second lot we got under the growing local economies, and we got the initial funding was just for the intermodal, which was the 7.4.
Thank you. Any further comments? Councillor Webb.
Yes, Mr Mayor, everything that's been said I won't go over. I think it's going to be a fairly tight fiscal 12 months that we're facing. I actually think that the following 12 months will be a fairly tight fiscal period as well. But I think we've got the ability to get through this and look after our community. And I thank the staff for putting that stuff together. We've actually found some savings, and I think that's fantastic. And of course, we're going to have to work a lot harder as councillors, I think, over the next 12 months. And I think we're going to have to work a lot harder as councillors to be advocates for our community, to lobby, to get whatever money we can to help stimulate our economy in our region. And I think it'll be a lot of work that will have to be done, probably particularly by you, Mr Mayor, but supported by all of us as councillors, going and getting out there and getting into government's ear in whatever area we can and grab whatever money we can to help stimulate our own region. Everybody will be doing the same. We just need to be, I guess, on the front foot with this. And I think the councillors sitting around the table here are probably in a good position to do that. I know the council's in a good position to do that. But we are going to have to work a bit harder, I think, in the next 12 months and probably the 12 months after to just grab whatever opportunities are out there. In terms of the airport, it's probably one of council's greatest assets, but it's also, in this particular financial times, it's probably a bit of a burden. But we need to make sure that we keep that asset maintained as best we can, and so that when we do step out of the times that we're in, we'll be well positioned to take advantage of, I guess, tourism markets into the future and whatever else. And of course, the flying colleges speaks for itself. And I think what Councillor Inglis spoke about in terms of that $3 million, I think that's probably something that we need to start banging the drum on as well, as hard as we can, wherever we can. And I think that meeting with our pollies sooner rather than later to actually seek out what opportunities might be out there on top of the $3 million that's already been committed to us to help us through those tight times. We need to make sure that we can get that place up and running as quickly as possible and find work for local tradespeople to help us get that place in good shape, but also to provide them with some regular incomes where they're finding it a bit short in other areas.
Thank you. Any further comments, councillors? If not, I will put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The motion is carried. Item 9.4. Move Councillor Webb and second Councillor Inglis. Thank you. Councillor Webb, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Pretty straightforward, Mr Mayor.
Any councillors wish to speak against? If not, any councillors wish to make comment? Not. Pretty hard to comment on that one, Councillor Inglis.
Well, I can find 266 caps there.
Thank you. I'll now put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The motion is carried. Item 9.5. Move Councillor Inglis and Councillor Webb. Thank you. Councillor Inglis, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Yes, thanks, Mr Mayor. I just want to make a point with the JobKeeper and everything and what local government basically didn't get. And this report just highlights it to me. This report highlights the unfairness and lack of willingness by the federal government to take a more proactive policy approach towards making JobKeeper accessible to local government. As you can see in that report, there's two business units in there, the entertainment venues and the sport and recreation services. They have decreased income of 33% and 28%. And the threshold that they put on local government was that it could be about 30%, but on the entire business. On the entire business. You know, local government doesn't work like that. That was just a con because the bulk of our income comes from financial assistance grants and rates. So you were never going to meet that threshold test. But this report just reminds us that had they taken an approach whereby you could show, because a lot of councils are similar to us with the way they structure their business units. And we are hitting those thresholds of a 33% decrease in income. And they employ a lot of people and we've had no assistance at all. So we really have been hung out to dry there, Mr Mayor. Just two questions, Mr Mayor, or one question. The page 275, the Gunny Gnu Survey and Design 145K, I assume that's the section between Kalala Lane and thing. I'm just curious where that's at. Is that done, finished?
Through you, Mr Mayor. Stage one's finished, or it's close to 100%.
Yep.
We've still got to do this design for stages 2 and 3. The RMS, they go through what they call a gateway process, and they're proceeding through their gateway process. At this stage, they've been allocated $3 million, and that's allowed us to finish stage 1, but there hasn't been any further funding announced. They have told us that they're keen on the project, and there are some funding streams that the state has access to, and they're pushing for the Gunny Gnu Road to be fully funded. I think it's about $20 million, $25 million. So we're hopeful, but we have nothing.
It would just be so good, Mr Mayor, to get that section done. Mr Mayor, my last comment is the mountain bike track in there. I just want to make a point, Mr Mayor. I was up there on the weekend, and for those who like bushwalking and don't like riding mountain bike tracks, well, there's some great pedestrian walks up there. But the volunteers, the amount of volunteers up there doing this whole heap of work up there, busy little precinct, and haven't they done a great job up there, Mr Mayor, the mountain bike track. The amount of volunteers I just noticed on the weekend, building new tracks, going for it. In a short period of time, they've done a fantastic job. And the people using it, and the young kids using it, fantastic. So a pat on the back to them.
Thank you. Any councillors wish to speak against the motion? Any councillors wish to make comment? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Those against, the motion is carried. Item 9.6. Move Councillor Rodder and Councillor Inglis, thank you. Councillor Rodder, do you wish to speak to your motion? No, thank you. Any councillors wish to speak against? Any councillors wish to make comment? Councillor Inglis?
Mr Mayor, there's a big impact on budgets going forward. I see that our interest rates returned down by 1.5 million. Certainly makes the point, doesn't it, about the decreased interest rates. My question was, Mr Mayor, and I see on calls down to 0.5. God, keeps going, Mr Mayor. They want us to pay them for us to have investments with them. What return rates, I'm assuming you would have averaged it, but did we use for our budget predictions out of interest?
Through you, Mr Mayor, 1.5 is the number that we used originally. Those numbers were done in February, so prior to this. So what we are doing is looking at where we can look at making better gains, particularly with internal loans and what our options are in that space, and the rest of it we're just monitoring as we go.
So our budget estimates
1.5
tonight are still based on 1.5.
That's correct.
You'd be busted to get that.
We won't, yeah. I mean, that was why it was a good point to add that additional item in regards to uncertainty. I mean, at the moment, if you were to forecast based on what we know as of right today, a more realistic number is probably about 0.8 to 0.9.
Mm-hmm. Anyone wish to speak against? Any comments? Councillor Webb?
Yeah, just a comment, just following on from Councillor Inglis to you, Chris, I think that's something you're going to have to keep your eye on probably week to week, because I think there's going to be some more movement there, and we're probably not going to be the winners. And I worry about the next 12 months in that area, because we are down considerably now, along with every other local government body in New South Wales that has got some money invested. We're very fortunate, I think, that this council is probably in a better fiscal position than most, but we still need to make sure that we stay that way, and the only way we'll do that is by looking for whatever opportunities are out there. But point 8.
Well, through you, Mr Mayor, there's, I guess, because of the way our funds are structured and because of the different funds that we have to be very careful how we manage the incomes between general fund, sewer fund and water fund. So we will be monitoring term deposits as a rule. We don't have them last more than 12 months. We are monitoring them literally every week and seeking to how we can maximise the funds that we have available.
Can we lend the water fund some money at 10% or something? Boost it. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Any further comments, councillors? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The motion is carried. Item 10.1. Councillor Inglis and Councillor Wilson. Thank you. Do you wish to speak to your motion, Councillor Inglis?
Mr Mayor, as Chairman of the Arts Committee, just a couple of quick comments. The new strategic plan, and for those who have got the time and have an interest in art, they also completed another document which is referenced in the report, and that's the assessment of the collection report. So just, if nothing else, gives you a ready reckoner of actually what's in there and the significance of it to the gallery. But the plan is it's a critical component of the Create New South Wales plan, and without it, of course, and this year we're upping our request to $80,000 per annum. So, and this very much ticks the boxes for that. So, and the other thing, Mr Mayor, as stated in the community consultation section of the plan, even though this is to go on to public exhibition, Bridget and her team have already undergone extensive consultation with all the major stakeholders. So even though it's a draft going out, there's been lots of, the heavyweights have already been involved, and they've done a good job there, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Any councillors wish to speak against the motion? Any other comments? Councillor Wilson, do you wish to comment?
No, I just absolutely support everything Councillor Inglis has said. We've got a really innovative, proactive team in the arts, and this talks quite a bit about our audience and the delivery to our audience, which is totally expanding outside our region now and even internationally, actually. So over the COVID area, they put in programs that were accessed from places like Canada and the England and well outside our region, metropolitan areas. So it just, I guess that's saying that we've got a really innovative leadership and direction, and it's encouraging, and this document is an excellent document.
Thank you. Any further comments, councillors? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The motion is carried. Item 10.2. Move Councillor Wilson and Councillor Inglis. Councillor Wilson, do you wish to speak to your motion? Any councillors wish to speak against? Any councillors wish to make comment? Councillor Inglis.
Mr Mayor, again, just as Chairman of the committee, this was our first meeting of the new committee, Mr Mayor, and you're on that. So just to quickly mention, we've got 6 community members, 4 of them are new, and it's a really good cross-section of the creative arts scene. And I get a good feeling that they're going to make a great contribution. I think it's a 4-year appointment, so, you can see the enthusiasm there. Mr Mayor, I just want to do, again, I know I'm Chair and I probably sound biased, but I do want to do a shout out for the art gallery and the library staff. I'm talking about COVID-19. They've come up with some really innovative and creative ways to maintain service delivery, particularly with the library. And the art gallery, with they explored some really new ground with technology in relation about online exhibitions, and they all deserve a big pat on the back. And the entertainment venues, Mr Mayor, I've had terrific feedback from people they've had to cancel all their events and all that sort of stuff, and that's not easy to keep everybody happy. And I've had feedback from a whole range of people who have said that they have done that in an extremely professional way. The way that they've cancelled events and tried to reschedule them, and that's all just sounds like it's rolling off the tongue, but there's a lot in that. So a big shout out for the venue staff, the art gallery staff and the library staff for their efforts through COVID-19.
Thank you. Any further comment, councillors? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Motion is carried. And now, before I call for a motion for 11.1 and 11.2 to go into closed council for consideration, I'll make the invitation for any members of staff or any members of the council who would wish to have any of these matters brought to open council. If not, if we could have a motion, councillors, please, for 11.1 and 2. Move Councillor Betts and Councillor Wilson, thank you. Any councillors wish to speak to those motions or against? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Those against?